Yo, hi. So, the new Caligula's Horse record just came out last week, and I have to talk about it because I hadn't heard of them until just before New Year's, but I just started listening, and I'm mind blown that a band that sounds this cool exists, and I had literally never heard of them before. I just put on Charcoal Grace, and boom! Usually, I'm upset when a band I've slept on for a while ends up being really good. But in this case, I'm pleasantly surprised because this band was completely out of my radius of musical knowledge until a few months ago, so I can't really say that I slept on them. They just happened to pop up on my phone screen one night while I was scrolling through r/prog metal. Maybe it's because the name Caligula's Horse sounds like a draft IPA your dad brews out of his garage with a unicorn on the can. I love prog bands and their propensity for funky names. It's great. You ever heard of Space Octopus Cartel? No, you haven't. Aussie prog heads Caligula's Horse dropped their 6th full-length record, Charcoal Grace, back on the 26th. I gave this sucker a week to digest with a ton of run-throughs, and I honestly had a really good time with it. I heard the singles before it came out, but I didn't prep myself with any previous records before jumping into this one. I went in totally blind, and as soon as I heard that intro riff to Golem for the first time, I was locked the fuck in. Charcoal Grace has a lot of concepts I think are cool. In some ways they're unique, and in some they're very much quintessential prog metal fare, but I by no means say that in a critical way. You have your 10-minute long epics, time signature changes, strings in the background, rousing soundscapes, but there are elements of this album's construction that, when combined, turn this whole thing into a very compelling experience. Now, I don't have any prior experience with Caligula's Horse material to compare this against. Reddit would have me believe that getting to experience this band for the first time in the modern era is a spiritual experience that they were totally jealous of. All I really have to say after listening to this is, yo, my bad. So here's what I observed. First, I'm a sucker for records that are cohesive episodes from start to finish. A huge chunk of my music listening experiences these days are putting on full albums front to back. Look no further than the mighty Vinyl Shelf. And Charcoal Grace is a pretty fantastic start-to-finish type of listen. The first and last tracks are both great bookends that go over 10 minutes but explore some of the same themes in different ways. The 4-song title track suite feels like a side quest in the middle of a bigger overarching journey. The song immediately after that is a good palate cleanser for the whole experience, and the other 2 songs are bursting with a lot of character in very different ways from everything else on the track listing. That is an insultingly short way to summarize this album, but it all makes sense in context. The 60 minutes that this record lasts for feel like they fly by in about half that time. Second, the singles were all very different from one another, but did really well to set expectations for what was to come. Golem has that groovy riff from earlier, but it's the only real riff-oriented song on the album. The World Breathes With Me is 10 minutes long, but showcases a lot of elements that will come back up on the record in some form, and The Storm Chaser was written entirely on single-coil pickups, showcasing more of the album's sound beyond just bridge pickup humbucker chug, even if there is a lot of that on this whole project. So because all of that came out before the album and showcased such a wide breadth of songwriting, it pleased me even more to hear the rest of the record and discover that the singles really did represent a good preview of what was to come. Third, this album was built on marrying lead guitar and piano together in perfect harmony. 90% of the time, if you're hearing a piano, there's a high or low gain guitar tone in the same octave, mirroring the same notes. Sometimes one is more prominent than the other in the mix, but it's almost always there. And if it's not guitar, then it's Jim's vocal that's matching the piano. The stories that this album takes you through, whether through Tesseract-style gent guitar and drum passages or through quieter moments with more atmosphere, is being told by that specific instrument combo. It's setting the mood for every song and telling you exactly what you're supposed to be feeling. Are we melancholic, bursting with hope, celebrating because dad finally came back from the drugstore with milk after 15 years? Wait, whatever it might be, that piano is the narrator, and it's writing Charcoal Grace's plot. Fourth, just the general contrast of everything. Whether it's contrasting songs to one another in the order they're in the track list, or elements within those songs being drastically different but appearing anyway, sometimes at the same time, it makes for some really cool moments. For example, there's a moment in Pray where the drums and guitars go full double kick breakdown mode, but where any other band might have screams at that specific point, Jim just keeps singing in the same tone he always has been. Contrast. Another is Sales getting deliberately positioned after Give Me Hell in the track listing. You go from this heavy, dark, everything's gone wrong, doomsday style song that immediately transitions into this soft atmospheric tune that pulls everything down by a few notches so you can get a respite after the Charcoal Gray side quest. Contrast. Another is how most of Mute's runtime is full of high-gain guitars, chugs, and leads, but before most of that, there's a fucking flute? Contrast. And this might all be jarring if you're not used to flows like this, but I really like the ups and the downs that Charcoal Grace has because you really don't know what's coming up next, even if you still follow the same general theme or style, and that keeps you engaged throughout the whole experience if you let it. Fifth, and finally, Jim's vocals. God damn. He can get vulnerable or sound venerable. Some sections might be fragile and soft, and others are menacing and full of disappointed dad energy, let's be honest. Which makes complete sense because the whole record is dispelling this negative pent-up frustration from the pandemic. Despondence about the state of humanity, giving advice from one generation to another, admonishing selfishness and lack of common sense. Like, we all went through a range of shit feelings during COVID, but Jim is just unleashing them. But he only screams like twice, and not for very long. And as a recent Caligula's Horse enjoyer, I didn't know that he literally didn't do harsh vocals up until this record. And again, I'm not saying this just because I'm a metalhead and I like screaming, but there were plenty of times I thought he was going to use them more and just didn't. Like, for as angry as Give Me Hell is, and as tantalizing as many of its heavier passages get, where I think it would be perfect for some screaming vocals to match its aggression, he just doesn't go there. I believe the term for this is edging, but on the flip side, I think most of the times he goes lighter, more falsetto, are usually pretty well placed, and he's either syncing up with the piano melody or he's carving his own path through some of these songs and just keeps on aiding in that contrast. So I think most things here are honestly pretty well done. I guess, if anything, while I am a bit sad I didn't know this band existed until late last year, I don't know if I could have had a better introduction to their sound. I've read comments about Rise Radiant and In Contact being really good, so now they're in my On Deck playlist, but Charcoal Grace is a big therapeutic energy release that felt like a good enough place as any to get on the horse. You see what I did there? They're going to be in LA later this month. I might have to go. Tickets are almost $50 though. Like, guys, can you give me a discount? Guys, I said I liked your album. Jeez, can you throw a brother a bone here?